Recruiting rankings versus results. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down recruiting rankings and what they have translated to on the field in regards to wins and losses, championships on the field. What's the reality compared to what we thought it might be based on recruiting rankings? We have broken down a number of rivalries. Ohio State versus Michigan during the Urban Meyer era. Alabama Clemson, they just played another national championship game. How have Alabama and Clemson fared on the recruiting trail versus what has resulted in a 2 versus 2 standoff in the college football playoff over the past 4 years? And what about the Sunshine State, the most heavily sought after, talent-rich high school football state in all of the land, even in comparison to Texas and California? How have the three major schools played out in Florida in battling for that talent? Florida, Florida State, and Miami. We have looked at those. Please check out the videos and give us your comments, your likes, your shares, and please subscribe to the channel, which provides the best discussion, debate, and analysis in college football. Next up, we go to the ACC, where at the outset of this decade, Florida State owned the ACC. In fact, if you go back to the entry of Florida State into the ACC, it took forever, and it took a Virginia goal line stand for Florida State to even lose a game in the ACC. They were such the dominant program. That generally held through until 4 or 5 years ago. At the outset of this decade, in 2010, there was a power emerging under Dabo Swinney, the Clemson Tigers. And so we had a matchup for a few seasons of Clemson, Florida State, who would win the Atlantic Division, therefore would then win the ACC championship and be a major player toward winning a national championship. Jimbo Fisher won that BCS championship in 2013, made it back to the college football playoff after a big win against Clemson in 2014, and then things changed in 2015. Deshaun Watson and Dabo Swinney and that defense took over, and Clemson took charge of the ACC. Florida State was still an excellent program, having made it to a New Year's Six Bowl in 2015 and then winning the Orange Bowl in 2016. But Clemson became the elite team in the ACC. So for the past several seasons, certainly going back to before 2012, Clemson and Florida State have by far owned the ACC. Florida State first having the upper hand, and then there being a power struggle and a really tight matchup for a few years, and now Clemson has risen to the top by far in the ACC. That change came in, again, 2015 when Clemson made it to the national championship game with a monumental win against Florida State to win the division, the conference, and then go to the playoff. So if we look at these teams going back to 2011 in the recruiting rankings, because I'm basically taking the two teams that played in 2015, so I'm marking 2015 as the dividing line of when Clemson took over the ACC. So those teams that comprise the 2015 rosters for Clemson and Florida State go back to the 2011 recruiting class. How well did Clemson recruit in 2011 all the way through 2018 versus Florida State? All right. Florida State during this time, from 2011 through this last recruiting class that played in 2018, pulled in 23 5-stars. 23 5-stars for Florida State during this time. How many do you think Clemson signed? 13. 23 for Florida State, 13 for Clemson. 4-star signings at Florida State, 93 since 2011. Clemson, 61. Clemson has pulled in 2 top 10 recruiting classes with an average ranking of number 13 since 2011. Florida State has pulled in 6 top 10 recruiting classes since 2011 with an average ranking of 5.5. And this is what it's meant on the field since 2015. Clemson is 55-4 since 2015. They lost the national championship game in 2015 to Alabama. In 16, they lost to Pitt. In 17, they lost to Syracuse. In 18, and they also lost to Alabama in the playoff. There's the 4 losses. And of course, Syracuse, or of course, Clemson went undefeated this past season, winning the national championship at 15-0. 55-4 for Clemson since 2015. Florida State during that same time frame, 32-19, which has been a very uneven 32-19. That sounds like a lot of 7-5s and 8-4s. No, for Florida State, they were much better than that in 2015 and 16, going 10-3 and 10-3, and going to 2 New Year's 6 bowl games. But the past 2 years, rock bottom for a program like Florida State at 7-6 and 5-7. So again, Florida State at 32-19, Clemson 55-4. The Tigers have gone 30-2 in conference play during that time. The aforementioned losses to Pitt and Syracuse in 16 and 17. Florida State at just 2 games over 500 at 17-15, as they have gone 5-3, 5-3. But the past 2 years have gone actually just 3-5 and 3-5 the past 2 years in the ACC. So again, for Florida State in the ACC, 17-15. Clemson going 30-2 in conference play since 2015. Clemson, of course, has won 2 national championships and 4 conference championships in those 4 seasons. Florida State has been shut out since winning the ACC and going to the college football playoff in 2014. Our comparison of Clemson and Florida State, and while the Seminoles have maintained, for the most part, maintained their status in the recruiting rankings, Dabo Swinney and Clemson have performed much better on the field the past 2 seasons, and even before that in 2016 and 15 in taking over the ACC. Our analysis of the Clemson-Florida State rivalry, both in the recruiting rankings and then also the final results on the field. Right here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football.